There's a cruel kind of humor in realizing you've been playing the role of the fool in your own life. I mean, who could script it better than life itself? A loving husband, two adorable kids, a wife who's the picture of perfection, and a secret lurking so big it shatters all of it in a single breath. Oh, and the punchline? It's your 7-year-old son who casually drops the truth like it's show and tell at school. So, let's back up. My name's Nathan Cross. I'm 38, a systems engineer with a knack for catching flights as much as catching bugs in software. It comes with the territory. I'm away for work probably 8 to 10 days out of every month. My wife, Clara, 35, is an art therapist, someone who exudes this calm, grounded presence you'd think could never waver. We've been married for 12 years, have 2 kids, Noah 7 and Ellie 4, and live in a cozy suburban dream. Last Saturday, Clara was at her art studio, supposedly prepping for an upcoming showcase. I just returned from a trip the night before and was looking forward to reconnecting with the kids. We were building castles out of Legos when Noah turned to me with that innocent curiosity only kids have. "Dad," he said, "do you like Mommy's friend who comes over when you're gone?" My stomach nodded. "What friend?" He furrowed his little brow, concentrating. "The man. He stayed here 2 times. Ellie doesn't like him. He says we watch too much TV and that we should go to bed early so he and Mommy can have fun." I don't remember the exact words Noah used after that because I felt like the room was spinning. My son, my sweet, oblivious son, had just detonated the most perfectly wrapped bomb of betrayal I'd ever imagined. I tucked the kids into bed that night, my mind racing. Clara came home late, tired but cheerful, her face flushed with the afterglow of a creative evening. She kissed me goodnight, oblivious to the turmoil raging inside me. After she fell asleep, I grabbed a flashlight and started searching. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for. Just something, anything to confirm what my gut already knew. It didn't take long. Tucked under the couch in our bedroom was a man's watch, cheap and generic, but definitely not mine. Next to it was a pair of sunglasses, scratched up but undeniably masculine. I stared at those items for what felt like hours. The weight of them, the quiet confirmation of what my son had unknowingly exposed, made my chest feel like it was collapsing. Clara's calm, patient demeanor, the woman I thought I knew, now felt like a mask hiding something dark and cruel. I didn't confront her that night. I couldn't. Instead, I sat in the dark, gripping the watch like it was a lifeline, my mind replaying every suspicious moment from the past year. Every late night at the studio, every hush phone call she stepped outside to take, every time I came home to a house that felt just a little off. This was only the beginning. The next morning, I acted like everything was fine. Clara was making pancakes, her laughter ringing through the kitchen as she teased Noah about putting syrup on everything. Ellie was perched on a stool, her little hands sticky with batter. It was the picture-perfect family scene, but all I could see were the sunglasses and watch, like neon signs screaming, "She's lying to you." I knew I needed proof before confronting her. Proof so airtight, she couldn't wiggle out with excuses or tears. Clara had always been quick on her feet, skilled at deflecting or turning the narrative. If I came at her now, she'd find a way to make me question myself, and I wasn't about to give her that chance. That day, while she took the kids to the park, I searched the house. Every drawer, every pocket, every hiding spot I could think of. At first, I came up empty, but then, tucked in the bottom of a laundry basket, I found it, a crumpled receipt from a boutique hotel downtown. The date on it hit me like a slap. I'd been in Dallas for a conference. Clara had told me she was taking the kids to visit her parents that weekend. I even FaceTimed her she was sitting on her parents' couch, or so I thought. But the receipt didn't lie. Neither did the entry on our credit card statement for a bottle of champagne from the hotel bar. My mind raced with images I didn't want to see. That night, I planted a small voice recorder in our bedroom. It felt invasive, wrong even, but I told myself I wasn't spying on her, I was protecting myself. If she was lying, I deserved to know the truth. For 3 days, nothing. Just the mundane sounds of our life. Clara humming as she got ready for bed, the kids giggling in the background, even her sighs as she flipped through a book at night. It almost made me doubt myself. Maybe Noah had misunderstood. Maybe I was being paranoid. But on the fourth day, everything changed. I was at work when I got the notification. Clara had taken a personal day, something she rarely did. The house was quiet, except for the voice of a man I didn't recognize. I could barely breathe as I listened to the recording. His tone was playful, flirtatious, and Clara sounded like a stranger. She laughed in a way I hadn't heard in years, soft and full of warmth. She called him babe. The man mentioned a trip they were planning, a getaway for the two of them. He asked if I'd be away next weekend. Clara hesitated, then said, "He's always traveling. It won't be a problem." My blood ran cold. That night, I stared at the watch and sunglasses, a plan forming in my mind. These weren't just evidence, they were tools. I slipped the watch into my pocket and carefully inspected the sunglasses for any identifying marks. Inside the bridge, I found a small engraving, a brand name and a serial number. Perfect. The next morning, I called in sick. While Clara was busy with errands, I began my work. A quick call to the watch manufacturer led me to the jeweler who had sold it, and the jeweler was able to identify the buyer. It wasn't Clara. It was a man named Eric West. Armed with this information, I searched Eric's name online, eventually finding his social media profiles. There he was, all smiles in his photos, tagging himself at the same boutique hotel on weekends. I kept digging. Eric's post painted a clear picture. He wasn't just someone passing through Clara's life. He was a recurring presence. Photos at trendy restaurants, captions with cryptic innuendo, and one selfie outside the art studio where Clara worked. My stomach churned. I called a private investigator. I needed someone who could discreetly tail her, gather evidence, and ensure I had the truth laid bare. Meanwhile, I tracked down Clara's phone bill and noticed a recurring number in her call logs, Eric's. It confirmed what I already knew, but it still felt like a punch to the gut. The final piece fell into place later that week when I overheard Clara on the phone. She thought I was in my office, but I stood quietly in the hallway as she giggled, her voice low and intimate. "Next Saturday works. He's flying out Friday night," she said. My heart raced as I realized she was finalizing plans for their next meeting. I adjusted my travel schedule, telling Clara I had to leave Friday night for a 2-day trip. She played the part of the supportive wife perfectly, helping me pack and kissing me goodbye. I drove to a nearby motel and waited. The PI texted me updates as Clara and Eric made their moves. On Saturday night, they checked into the boutique hotel. I arrived shortly after, camera in hand. The hotel staff were cooperative, apparently. Eric had a reputation for entertaining there. They gave me a key card to a vacant room across the hall from theirs, and I waited. My heart was pounding as I heard laughter coming from their room, Clara's unmistakable voice mingling with his. When the time was right, I knocked on their door. My camera was recording, and I was ready for the confrontation that would shatter the perfect facade she had built. The hallway outside their room felt like a battlefield. My heart pounded in my chest as I stood there, the key card in one hand and my phone recording in the other. Every laugh, every muffled word coming through the door felt like a dagger. But this wasn't the time to hesitate. I swiped the card, pushed the door open, and stepped inside. There they were, Clara and Eric, tangled together on the plush hotel bed like they had no care in the world. It took them a moment to register my presence, but when they did, the color drained from their faces. Clara gasped, clutching at the sheets to cover herself, while Eric sat up, his smug, confident demeanor melting into shock. "Wow," I said, letting the camera linger on them. My voice was cold, dripping with mockery. What a beautiful picture of modern family values. Clara, my loving wife, and oh, you must be Eric, the babe I've heard so much about. Eric stammered, his hands raised in some pathetic attempt at surrender. "I didn't know you'd be here." "Of course you didn't," I shot back, my voice rising. "But you did know she had a husband, didn't you? Or were you under the impression that I was just a distant memory while you played house?" Clara was crying now, her face a mess of tears and humiliation. "Nathan, please, I can explain." "Oh, save it," I interrupted, swinging the camera toward her. "Explain it to the kids when they're older, Clara. I'm sure they'll love to hear how Mommy ditched family movie nights for this." I turned the camera back to Eric. "And you? What's your excuse? Don't tell me you're one of those clowns who believes in true love with someone else's wife." Eric finally found his voice, though it was weak and unconvincing. This isn't what it looks like. I couldn't help but laugh, a bitter, scathing sound that echoed in the room. Oh, it's exactly what it looks like, Eric. It's betrayal, plain and simple. And you're just as guilty as she is. I pocketed the phone, the recording safely saved. Now, it was time for the part I'd been waiting for. I closed the distance between us in a few quick steps and shoved Eric hard against the headboard. You knew, I growled, my voice low and dangerous. You knew she was married, and you didn't care. You waltzed into my life, into my house, and thought you could take what's mine. Clara screamed, but I didn't care. I wasn't hitting him yet, but the rage in my voice was enough to make him cower. Do you even understand what you've done? To me? To my kids? Or are you too busy enjoying the thrill of playing the other man? Eric tried to push me off, but I wasn't having it. I grabbed the front of his shirt, yanking him forward so we were face to face. You're going to answer for this, I spat. I'll make damn sure of it. Finally, he managed to squirm free, tumbling off the bed in a pathetic heap. He scrambled to his feet, his hands still raised. I didn't mean for this to happen, he shouted, backing toward the door. Didn't mean for it to happen? I repeated, my voice dripping with venom. Oh, so what? You just accidentally fell into my wife's bed? Spare me the excuses, Eric. Clara tried to intervene, her hands clutching at my arm. Nathan, stop. Please, just stop. This is all my fault. I shook her off, my glare never leaving Eric. You're damn right it's your fault, Clara. But him. I jabbed a finger in Eric's direction. He didn't have to encourage it. He didn't have to show up in my house, around my kids, pretending to be some harmless friend. Eric, realizing he was outmatched, made a break for the door. You're insane, he shouted as he bolted down the hallway. I let him go, my chest heaving with adrenaline and fury. Turning back to Clara, I saw her crumple onto the bed, sobbing uncontrollably. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at the woman I thought I knew, the woman who had shattered my trust. I hope it was worth it, I said coldly, because everything we had, it's gone. With that, I walked out, leaving her to face the wreckage she had created. Walking out of that hotel room felt like stepping into a new, colder world. The warmth I once felt for Clara had been extinguished, replaced by an icy resolve. My next steps were clear. Protect my kids, secure my future, and make sure Clara faced the consequences of her betrayal. The hardest part was Noah and Ellie. They were too young to understand the full scope of what was happening, but I couldn't shield them completely. That evening, after picking them up from my sister's house where I'd left them during my work trip, I sat them down for the hardest conversation of my life. Noah, Ellie, I began, kneeling to their level. Mommy and Daddy are going through something right now. You'll still see both of us, but things might change a little. Noah's brow furrowed. Like, you won't live here anymore? His innocent question cut deeper than any confrontation I'd had with Clara. I pulled him into a hug, Ellie clinging to my side. I'm always going to be your dad, and I'll always be here for you. That will never change. Their little faces were filled with confusion, but they didn't ask more. I decided to leave the details for later, sparing them the pain of knowing the truth, at least for now. The next day, I met with a divorce attorney. I laid everything on the table. The recordings, the surveillance, the hotel receipt, and even the watch and sunglasses. The attorney nodded grimly, her expression one of practiced detachment. This is more than enough to prove infidelity, she said. Given the circumstances, you'll likely have an upper hand in negotiations, especially with the kids involved. That's what I needed to hear. I wasn't out to ruin Clara's life, but I was going to fight tooth and nail to ensure the kids stayed with me. They didn't deserve to be caught in her web of lies and deceit. When Clara was served with divorce papers later that week, the fallout was immediate. She showed up at the house, tears streaming down her face, begging me to reconsider. Nathan, please, she sobbed. We can fix this. Don't tear our family apart. Her words didn't move me. You tore it apart the moment you let him into our lives, I said, my voice cold and steady. This is the consequence of your actions. She broke down completely, her cries echoing through the house. But my resolve didn't waver. I'd spent too long trusting her, loving her, and now I was done. Clara fought me on custody. She wanted joint custody, claiming the kids needed both parents equally. But I knew what the attorney had told me. With evidence of infidelity and proof of her neglecting the kids during her affair, I had a strong case for primary custody. The court proceedings were grueling. Clara's attorney painted her as a devoted mother who made a mistake but still prioritized her children. I countered with the recordings and my testimony about how she had invited Eric into our home while the kids were present. The judge listened intently, his expression unreadable. Finally, after weeks of back-and-forth arguments, he ruled in my favor. I was granted primary custody, with Clara allowed supervised visitation until she could prove she was capable of maintaining a stable environment for the kids. Clara broke down in court when the ruling was announced. I felt a pang of guilt watching her crumble, but it was outweighed by the relief of knowing my children were safe. Adjusting to life as a single dad wasn't easy, but it was a welcome change from the constant tension I'd lived with during the unraveling of my marriage. Noah and Ellie adapted quickly, their resilience surprising me. We established new routines, filling our days with laughter, weekend outings, and quiet evenings reading together. Clara's visits were strained at first. The kids were confused, especially Noah, who couldn't understand why she wasn't there all the time. But I made it my mission to provide stability, to show them that, no matter what, they were loved. As for Clara, she tried to make amends, sending long emails and leaving tearful voicemails. But I didn't respond. My love for her had been replaced by a need to protect myself and my kids. The trust was gone, and with it, any chance of reconciliation. It's been a year since that day at the hotel. Life isn't perfect, but it's better. The kids are thriving, and I found peace in knowing that I did everything I could to salvage what mattered most. Clara and I communicate only about the kids now, and while I'll always carry the scars of her betrayal, I've learned to let go of the anger. It doesn't mean I've forgiven her. I haven't. But I refuse to let her actions define my life. And Eric? Last I heard, his wife left him too. Seems karma has a way of catching up with everyone. It had been nearly 2 years since the divorce was finalized. Life had settled into a new rhythm, one where Clara was no longer the axis of my world. Noah and Ellie were thriving, their laughter filling the house like it hadn't in years. I'd learned to find joy in the little moments again, baking cookies with Ellie, coaching Noah's soccer team, even just quiet evenings spent reading while they slept. I wasn't whole yet, but I was getting there. Then Clara came crashing back into my life. It started with a voicemail, her voice trembling, tears barely concealed beneath the surface. "Nathan, I need to talk to you. Please. It's important." I didn't respond. Over the years, I'd grown immune to her attempts to pull me back into her orbit. Her crocodile tears, her sudden pangs of regret, they didn't work on me anymore. But this time she persisted. Calls, texts, even showing up at the kids' school during my pickup time. Finally, after weeks of her relentless pursuit, she cornered me outside the soccer field during Noah's practice. She looked different, thinner, frilier, like life had knocked her down and kept her there. Her face was pale, her eyes sunken with exhaustion, and she wore a nervous smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Nathan," she said softly, her voice almost a whisper. "Please, just 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." Against my better judgment, I nodded. 5 minutes. We sat at a nearby picnic table, Clara fidgeting with her hands as she began to speak. "I made mistakes, Nathan. I know that. But I'm in a bad place right now, and I don't know who else to turn to." Her story spilled out like a poorly rehearsed play. Eric, the man she'd risked everything for, had moved on to someone younger and more naive. After their breakup, Clara had spiraled. She lost her job, her apartment, and her dignity. She'd been living paycheck to paycheck, scraping by on freelance art gigs that barely covered her rent. "I miss the stability we had," she said, her eyes brimming with tears. "The life we built together, the family we were." I sat there, stone-faced, as she spun her tale of woe. But something felt off. Her words didn't match the look in her eyes. Calculating, desperate. Then, she dropped the bombshell. "I need help, Nathan," she said, her voice breaking. "I'm behind on rent. and I'm facing eviction. I thought, maybe we could try again. For the kids. I almost laughed. For the kids? The same kids she had abandoned emotionally the moment she chose her affair over her family? The same kids who had cried themselves to sleep the first few nights she wasn't there? No, Clara, I said flatly. You don't want me back. You want my money. Her face turned red, her tears drying up almost instantly. That's not true. I still love you, Nathan. I've always loved you. I leaned back, crossing my arms. You don't get to play the love card now. You didn't love me when you were sneaking Eric into my house. You didn't love me when you let the kids think I was the bad guy during the divorce. And you sure as hell don't love me now. This isn't about love, it's about survival. Her mask cracked. For a split second, I saw the real Clara beneath the act. Angry, manipulative, and desperate. Nathan, I'm serious. I've changed. Changed, I said with a bitter laugh. Clara, you don't even believe that. Her jaw tightened, and she looked away. I'm not asking for much. Just enough to get back on my feet. You can afford it. There was the real Clara, always calculating, always angling for an advantage. Any lingering guilt I might have felt evaporated in that moment. She wasn't here for reconciliation. She wasn't here for the kids. She was here because she'd run out of options. No, I said, standing up. You made your choices, Clara. Now you can live with them. She reached out, grabbing my arm. Nathan, please. Think of the kids. I am, I said coldly, shaking her off. And that's exactly why I'm not letting you back into their lives to mess things up again. I walked away without looking back, my resolve unshaken. Clara called after me, her voice growing shrill with desperation, but I didn't stop. I'd spent years cleaning up the messes she left behind, and I wasn't about to let her drag me or the kids down with her again. That night, I told Noah and Ellie about the encounter in a way they could understand. Mommy is going through some tough times right now, but I want you both to know that you're my #1 priority, I said. Nothing will ever change that. They didn't ask many questions, just nodded solemnly. Noah gave me a hug, and Ellie climbed into my lap, resting her head on my chest. In that moment, I felt a profound sense of peace. Clara had lost her grip on me, and I was finally free. As for Clara, she faded into the background of our lives, her calls and messages dwindling as the months passed. She'd made her choices, and now she was facing the consequences. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like the fool anymore. I felt like a man who had taken back control of his life and found something better on the other side.